Welcome to the NBN Solutions UK Data Salary Survey 2022 podcast. My name is Robin Huggins. I'm Client Services Director for NBN Solutions, a recruitment, talent advisory and people solutions business based in Glasgow, Scotland. We specialise in solving talent problems in the data space, and our recently published salary survey was augmented by some research around four main topic areas that we, our clients and our community regard as crucial to the attraction of niche talent such as data analysts, data scientists and data engineers. In each episode of the podcast, we'll take a deeper dive into one of these topics with a special guest providing their input based on their background and experiences in the data space. In this episode, our topic is the changing shape of reward packages. The data talent landscape has changed forever over the last few years with the impact of globalisation, remote working, and the increasing demand for scarce human resources. These factors and others have caused a seismic shift in the ways in which organisations must structure their reward packages to both attract and retain data professionals. Increasingly, elements beyond a competitive salary and flexible working pattern are required to secure access to the best data talent. Joining me today to discuss this topic in more detail is Scott Leishman, the Global Head of People and Talent at Vector AI. Scott, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you, Robin, and thanks for the introduction. I'm Scott Leishman. I'm a senior people and operations leader, having worked in the technology space for the best part of the last 18 years, really kind of focusing from my initial kind of early start was like you guys, working in a search and selection firm, finding talent for global companies. Founded my own company after that, and then which unfortunately I also then had to wrap up in the last recession in 2010. But since then I've worked with global tech giants like Google, Skype, Microsoft, and for the last decade I've really been focused on working with startups from seed level to Series D, helping them put in place structures to become successful and achieve their kind of mission. So great to be here today and great to share my experience, my knowledge, and answer any questions you have.
Fantastic. Thank you again for this. So I suppose we'll start off diving into the current situation. I mean, it's been a hell of a last couple of years, but at NBN, what we've noticed is an unprecedented increase and fluctuation in both offered reward packages and consequently in expectations of data talent over the last couple of years. Specifically, your organisation, what are you doing to address this to ensure that you can attract and retain the best talent?
So you're right. I mean, it is unprecedented times. I've mentioned I was been working in this space for 18 years. I've never seen a market like it. I've never seen the kind of pressure to try and hire, the lack of talent that we have for the number of roles that we're hiring for. So it's definitely a candidate-led market currently, which is putting pressure on businesses. For us at Vector AI specifically, it's a challenge. So we're a startup. We have a finite amount of cash. We definitely can't compete with the Googles or the DeepMinds of the world in terms of kind of cash compensation. And we wouldn't want to. I mean, if you look at what's happening in the world at the moment, companies like Klarna, who have definitely been paying above market, are now having to make 10%, 20%, 30% reductions to their staff. So we can't be in that position. We have a duty for our shareholders, for our staff, to make sure that we do the right things for the company and make sure that we're successful in our kind of long-term mission. So we need to look outside of just cash compensation, and that is the wider compensation structure. What is important? And for me, that is a number of things. Yes, it's important. Cash is important, right? But also at the moment, everything's going up. Price of fuel, price of electricity are increasing. So we need to be aware of that and we need to be conscious of that and make sure that we are competitive and we provide a fair market value for the talent we attract. But there's also other things that we're looking at, which is things like career growth, progression, learning and development, key things that when we spoke to all of our staff and we do regular surveys to kind of understand from them what's important, these were the things that came back. So it isn't slides in the office, it isn't beer taps on a Friday. People have been working from home for 2 years. It's providing flexible working, flexible for them to manage whatever's important in their life, career progression, recognition, are all of the things that came back to me when I asked our staff what was important to them. No one asked me for anything else. No one asked me for significant pay increases. None of these were mentioned. We are doing things on top. So for instance, if people are working from home or working remote, we're offering expenses to pay for electricity, for fuel, for things that that they'll be using in their own time. And if they do want to come to the office, we're providing compensation for the train ticket when they're in the office. So there's small things that we can do that makes life easier for them, but we definitely can compete with those larger companies that are throwing cash at the situation.
I just want to focus in on that, because that's absolutely the perfect example. A lot of the work that we'll be asked to do is to advise in that scenario. You can't compete fiscally with the giants. You can't compete with the flying organizations, but what you can do is to modify. And you mentioned there a feedback loop where you'd asked employees what would they want. Have you changed the way in which you pay and reward over and above what you've mentioned there as a consequence of that feedback? Look, is there another example of something simple and pragmatic that you've listened to your staff, they've suggested something and you've said, we can implement that? Is there another example you could give?
Yeah, so one of the examples I can give, so we have changed the way in which we pay and reward, and that is that we've expanded and rolled out our EMI, or our share scheme, to the whole company. So one of the things that when I first joined was that certain members had options or had equity within the company. I've been a believer in every company that I've been at, that the actual feedback and the input you get from staff is significantly increased if everyone has a little bit of skin in the game. So one of the things that when I first did a questionnaire upon joining and asked what people would want, that was the biggest thing that came back, which was, I would love to have equity. I really believe in our mission. I believe what it is. So we've rolled out a new compensation structure for all of our staff that includes equity.
Okay. And looking back on it in a kind of more broader sense to your career to date, we're experiencing something at the moment that many of us would consider unprecedented, but this is not a new thing where the expectations between what the highly valued talent might be asking for and what the organisation can afford to give, there is often a disparity. There's often a difference between what employers can offer and what that top-tier talent is looking for. What strategies have you adopted? I mean, obviously the EMI one at the moment with the current organisation, but in the past, what other strategies, perhaps with larger organisations who couldn't offer that, what other strategies have you adopted to balance between demand and reality?
So I've always, everyone talks now about flexible working or 4-day weeks. This is, in front of everyone's kind of sort of thinking at the moment. I've always been like that. So it's about, for me, giving the people the ability to impact. So of course I mentioned some big names. I worked at Google previously. The reason that I didn't stay longer than 1 year was that I didn't feel I was having an impact into the way Google was being run. I felt I was just delivering upon someone else's kind of action, or delivering the actions upon someone else's request. Whereas I know and I understand what I really want, which is to use my experience, my knowledge to have a kind of huge impact. So it's about creating an environment where people can have that and people can really kind of push their ideas, be heard. I think is one of the most important things that I've always seen. And flexible working for me and my teams has always been the case. So I've always had people working from home if they need to. I've always had people, my very first company that I mentioned, which was a recruitment company, we did a 4.5-day week. We finished at lunchtime on a Friday, and people could do what they wanted to do. It wasn't lunchtime on a Friday, we're going to do some other company thing together. It was lunchtime on a Friday. You could go home, be with your family. You could nip away for the weekend if that was important to you to do stuff, get an earlier flight, whatever. So it's always been a big part of all of my strategies when I've been building them, either for my own companies or for the companies I work for, is to listen to the people, understand what's important to them, and then implement those changes where we can.
I really like the point regarding impact. Because it starts to move towards that, one of the other areas of the salary survey, which was looking around purpose. And one of the things that we found is that where organisations can offer an attractive reward package and a clearly demonstrable pathway of impact, this is the impact you will have in the organisation. These are the things that you will be able to change. They can often balance up that gap between expectation and reality, or the over salary demands over what expectations can actually be paid. Looking at what's been happening, this huge impact on the data talent shortage and the increasing salaries that we're seeing, and this is a big question, but do you believe it's time for a fundamental rethink? Or are we looking at more and more scenarios like the one you articulated earlier on? Is it time for a fundamental rethink? Do organisations have to, is there a ceiling that will be reached? And we just need to stop getting into this. It's almost like an arms race. Company A is offering this, so company B offers that, so company C has to offer this. Is it time from a reward perspective for a fundamental rethink?
I think it is time for a rethink, to be honest. So the large companies, and that's not going to be driven by the companies, that's going to be driven by the talent, and it's already happening, right? We're talking about the kind of great walkout, or being called various things over the last years, where people have realized sitting at home during COVID that it's time for a change. They want to do something different. They want to put life in front of work. The priorities definitely have changed. You know, I speak to hundreds of candidates over a kind of monthly basis when we're interviewing, and I do all of the final interviews for Vector. And every time I speak to them, I kind of ask them what's important to them, because I want to understand them as a person. I want to understand what we can provide to them, what their kind of mission is, what their drivers are. And that's the one way that I've always seen, by the way, as being how we've overcome the challenges with the companies like DeepMind and Google, is by listening, understanding what they want, and then providing something for them. And if it's not right, not moving forward, because if people are after the big cash packages, that's what they want to do, they want to work for the big names, then that's not us. So we're a B2C, so we're a B2B business, not a B2C business. So there's different motivations. So it's understanding those motivations. But it will be so going back to the question, apologies that I slightly went off track, but it will be the people, the candidates, the employees themselves that will make that change, because the big companies will realize that no matter how much cash they throw at it, the people will still not join, because they're looking for different things. And I know even since the time that I've worked at some of the companies I worked for before, I've seen a mind shift change from them as to how they approach candidates, how they evaluate them, how they bring them on, how they can try and retain them, and that's going to continue to happen. But I also think that the economic world as we're in and experience now, with interest rates rising, with the redundancies that I've already mentioned, I think other companies will realize, and actually private equity companies aren't going to continue just throwing money at the situation. So that's going to, so the two things that are going to impact that the most are the private equity companies, the lack of funds, the money to do that. And secondly, the kind of motivations and the mission of the candidates and their employees themselves to want to continue working for those type of businesses.
Yeah, and we've also seen it particularly over the last few years, where there's been a lot of work done at grassroots level to influence and affect supply. This was the space that we're in was a relatively new space 10 years ago in terms of its positioning in the talent marketplace. You know, 10 years ago it was rare to find people called data scientists. Now you can find them, but now we are seeing more and more academic institutions embracing this need. So as more people come through from grassroots, supply and demand will be affected, and hopefully there will be some normalization over the next few years. You spoke about the startup journey and where you were at the moment.
Yeah.
We will have people that will be listening in that will be in the same position as you, but they've maybe not got the benefit of the background you've got. In other words, you're an expert in talent, you're an expert in that human resources field, and you're an expert in reward. So let's give a little bit of advice to maybe people who are in a startup situation, but who are trying to do the job that you're doing, and they're maybe a CEO or they're a COO, but they've got another 20 hats that they're wearing every day. An attractive reward package is about more than just salary. What elements do you feel need to be included to ensure that that rewards package is seen as competitive throughout the employee's life journey? So we're looking at when somebody's joining an organization and maybe not jumping ship as soon as they get the bigger carrot dangled in front of them, but what can organizations do, particularly startups and scale-ups, to ensure that they are changing and reflecting the life journey of their employees?
Yeah, and so that's a really good question. The life journey of the employees, their ability is about progression. So right now, at Vector, and right in the middle of creating a competency framework, progression framework, and built onto the side of that compensation framework, which offers clarity to every employee as to where they sit in the organization, what skills they need to do to be successful in the role that they're doing, what opportunities there are in the future, and what growth areas they will need to be able to grow and progress within the company, and what that looks like over a 2, 3, 4, 5-year, 10-year period. Let's be honest, very few people stay in an organization for 10 years now. It's not like in the old days where people are institutionalized. Exactly. But listen, it's about providing that. That is the one thing that I have built and looked and supported and helped startups do over and over again, because that is the thing that I see as the most important thing for retention. It isn't a pay rise every year. It's an ongoing review of that person, their journey, what they're offering to the company, and making sure that they are rewarded. One of the things we have at Vector, which is I'm super kind of excited about and we love, is that we have a Slack channel which is all about it's called the congratulations channel, where every day there is messages in there from our peers telling everyone else how great other people have done, where they've helped them out, what amazing job they've done to deliver things. That live recognition for those people within the organization, I think, is one of the cultural pieces that is so good about where I work, and it's one of the things that I love. And it's not just the same people, it's not just the tech people or the data people that are being recognized, it's everyone through customer, through people. Every team gets a mention. And then when we have our town hall, which is every fortnight, where we welcome new people or we say goodbye to people that are moving on, we also then talk about those, congratulations, shout them out, and then my plan is to reward on the back of that as well. So we're going to have a recognition reward scheme, which is something that is another thing that you can implement at a startup that isn't complex, which is to give little rewards for people that go above and beyond and are living the values and the mission and the culture that you want to embed.
Excellent. So it's about, for anybody listening in at that stage, it's about sitting down at the beginning and clearly planning out that career progression, those milestones, the achievements, and the compensation that would be associated with those achievements, clearly mapping it out, ensuring that there is constant recognition throughout the organization, and then ensuring that that recognition for achievement is in some way rewarded with something that's not necessarily a fiscal measurement, but it could be something else. But it's just ensuring that, almost in a Pavlovian principle, we've got a stimulus response. If somebody does something well, that there's a reward in place for that, and it will inculcate a culture throughout the organization, regardless of size.
Correct, 100%.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you to become some kind of world-gazing economist and understanding of huge things and stimulus beyond our control. Over the last couple of years, we have had some crazy situations, and I'm looking back even towards the political situation in the United Kingdom around Brexit. I'm looking at COVID. As an expert in reward packages within the tech and data space, do you think what we're experiencing is a temporary blip or a more fundamental change?
To be honest, I don't think Brexit has had a massive impact on this. It's had some, I think. I think there's COVID for sure. As I said, the kind of mass resignation, people prioritizing different things. That's not a temporary blip or a temporary change. I think people are changed now for good. They are prioritizing their life, their health, their well-being over everything else. And I don't think that's going back to where we were post-COVID for sure. I think other aspects are temporary. So the increase of costs, this goes up and down for the last nearly 50 years of I've been alive. I've been through recession, so massive up points at the beginning of the end of the 90s, to recession and the challenges we had in 2010, to then massive boom period again. So from my view, it's a bit like house prices. There will be blips along the road, but things will continue to increase. So I don't see it being a temporary change. I think that there will be a little blip for now in terms of companies being able to provide packages, talent looking for where they are, but it goes in cycles. As I mentioned, it's a candidate-driven market. Not that long ago, it was a company-driven market. That will go backwards and forwards throughout the rest of time. But from my view, COVID has definitely had a long-lasting impact on what people think is important to them. And then that will be the key drivers in them making decisions. And that's why I think that smaller businesses who can provide that flexibility over large compensation packages will continue to win out.
Staying on that same theme then, but reflecting back on earlier in your career where you were working on behalf of the likes of Google, how do you tailor reward packages to attract and retain individuals who now, due to those freedoms that we've just spoken about, that work from home, freedoms afforded by globalisation, can now be hired by some of the world's biggest tech giants without leaving their spare rooms? And we spoke about this previously, where somebody who's living and working perhaps where I am right now, which is central Glasgow in Scotland, 10 years ago would be working probably for a Scottish-based company. Very definitely, it would probably be a Glasgow-based company. But now that same individual can be working almost anywhere in the world without leaving Glasgow. So how do you tailor a reward package to ensure that those people stay with your organisation rather than being snapped up by anyone anywhere else in the world?
So yeah, I mean, I've seen this firsthand, a lot over the last couple of years, particularly during COVID times, where people were made offers from San Francisco-based companies, and it was significantly cheaper. Even if they paid double the rate of someone's current salary package in Glasgow, it was still considerably cheaper for them to hire there. At Vector, we have an office in India, so we have 20 software engineers and support and QA people based there. I'm seeing it massively there as well, where there's people now that are being paid kind of London salaries based in Mumbai. Now, in some ways, I guess that's a great thing, right? So why should someone be rewarded differently just because they live somewhere else and they can do the same job? And I think that that's great. But there is an aspect of it's about why wouldn't everyone then just move to Mumbai? So is everyone just going to suddenly leave Glasgow and not work there, or leave London? And we're actually seeing that, to be honest. We're seeing a lot of people who have moved out of London during COVID aren't interested in coming back because cost of living is high, house prices are ridiculous, and that will have an impact on the house prices because demand will drop, etc., and that will have a hit in the longer term, as well as the increase in all of the other costs that are happening in the world at the moment. So these people have kind of moved out, and I know people that are living now in Leeds or in Manchester, doing exactly the same job, being paid the same. Ultimately, it's about creating fair packages for everyone, wherever they're based, to the best that you can do. But ultimately, if people want to chase the money and not focus on what's important to them, which is that flexibility, that kind of culture, the way of working, there will always be those people in life. That's how investment bankers do what they do, because they're there. They're not there because they love investment banking. I've never met one investment banker who actually enjoys the job, and I know a few. So they're there because they're interested and motivated by cash at the end of the day, and these people will always be there. So I don't think there is a one way. You just have to, as I said, look at the market, continually review what the market's doing, and then we use a number of data points. So in Europe, we use Radford. Radford provide us with basically an overview of other startups in similar positions, what they're paying, what their overall packages are in terms of equity levels, etc. So we can base and look at what we want to do and what's right for the business in comparison to the competitors or the people we feel we're going to be competing with. But we're in a really fortunate position where one of the other key drivers, when I asked our staff why they joined, also when I speak to candidates about what they're interested in doing working for us. So at Vector, we are having a social impact. So one of the biggest things that's happening in the world right now is supply chain, with the war, with what's going on with Suez Canal, with the issues of COVID still in China and closing ports. One of the biggest challenges the world faces, and the reason that costs are going up, is because of supply chain. And what we're doing is trying to solve that. So that mission alone is something that motivates people to come and join us over other companies, regardless of what our package is and what they take home on a monthly basis.
You mentioned something there, and I'm actually going to jump ahead here slightly because I want to just drag you back. You mentioned a tool there. One of the questions I was going to ask you was how do you stay ahead of the curve when it comes to offering competitive reward packages? I was wanting to look at that external research and validation. You mentioned something there, Radford?
Yeah, so Radford, like Towers Watson, is a provider of data that you can either purchase, or by providing your data, you can access their data, which is all anonymous, which shows what companies are doing. So the size of the company, what their salaries are for each of the functions within that business, whether it be engineering, data engineering, whatever. So we would access data like that, whether it be for India, in the US, so that we can make sure we understand what the world's doing, what that market's doing, so we can then set ourselves to be as competitive as we can be, depending on where our revenues are, what our targets are, without putting the future of the company at risk.
Thank you. You mentioned something earlier on I just want to dip back into. You spoke about, this wasn't your first rodeo. You've been doing working from home, working from anywhere policies for a number of years. And one of the things that you've done in your current organisation was to help people who wanted to work from home by giving reward elements for things like equipment, if they needed to buy screens at home, if they needed to set up a room better. Looking at that particular area, has the increase in hybrid or work from anywhere or work from home working patterns caused any other significant change to the way in which you shape your reward packages?
So not particularly us, and not since, I joined Vector in December, so I'm still fairly new, and we're still trying to navigate what's best for us as a company moving forward. I personally believe in a hybrid culture, and when we did again another questionnaire out to the company to understand what they wanted, we have a pretty young team, and our young team want to be around people, they want to learn from other people, so they want flexibility, but they definitely want a base. They want to be around, they want to learn. And my wife works at the BBC, she's a lawyer. Again, for the junior lawyers, they want to be in, they want to be around. The way that I learned all of the stuff that I've learned over the years is by working with people, listening into conversations, being able to grab someone and go for a coffee and just ask them questions. And it's much easier to do that when you're there in person than it is to then schedule a Zoom call, schedule a call, pick up the phone. It's just easier to be there and just grab someone, pop out and grab a bit of lunch, whatever, and learn from them. So I'm a firm believer in flexibility, but I'm not a believer in 100% remote businesses. I don't think personally that would work for me, but everyone is different. And I know, particularly within the tech, the data space, there's a lot of people that are more than happy just sitting in their own office at home, like I am now, working during the week. So there is no right fit for everyone. There is a fit for what is best for the significant company you're working for. And I know I've talked about this multiple times, but it's just the real important thing is understanding your company and understanding what they want, not pushing something in that is a direction that's driven by the leadership team without any input from the rest of the team. There lies trouble, and that's when you will lose staff to other companies.
Totally agree. Okay, crystal ball time. What's beyond the horizon for reward within data? What do you see approaching that could potentially impact the composition of reward packages over the next few years?
That's a difficult one. So, as I said, the biggest changes I think have happened recently. So in terms of the way, the flexibility of working, the non-financial parts, I guess, or reward have significantly changed during COVID. So the next few years, I don't see much of a change other than the larger companies are going to have to cut on to this. They're going to have to pick up and they're going to have to start doing this. Otherwise, they will hemorrhage staff to smaller businesses who can allow this. There's a challenge coming up as well. So people have talked about this 4-day week. It's everywhere I go, I see it. I see people talking about it, how great it is. I work in a startup. I worked in startups for the last 10 years. I can't get all the work done that I need to do in 5 days. So a 4-day week for me is just really long days for four days, and then a day off without doing stuff. So I don't think it works in smaller businesses, but I do think that is a big thing that people will offer in larger companies. And I think you'll see a lot of big companies picking this up, whether it's big tech companies like Google, whether it's companies like BT, who are kind of, all of these bigger companies, that is what they're going to jump on, I think, as a way to try and get the talent, is offering that, where a startup won't be able to offer that, because ultimately we don't have enough people as a startup, as we're building, to be able to do all of the work that we have, because we need to protect our runway, we need to protect the length of time before we need to raise cash. And as I mentioned earlier in this call, raising cash at the moment is more difficult than it was 6 months ago. So that's not going to be something that we can offer, but that's something that I think big companies will really jump on and really push as the 4-day week, which a lot of people will see as the best thing for that. And I think that then that's where, as a small business, as startups within this space, we're going to have to think about how we kind of build plans around that to stop people just deciding to go and take that approach.
That's a brilliant point you've made there, and it's actually got me thinking back to that idea of an arms race, where at the moment it seems to be it's whoever can put the bigger bucket of money on the table, but a scenario where larger organizations stop putting more money on the table but have the luxury of being able to say a 4-day week. Maybe then it's going to be somebody that offers the 3.5-day week. Maybe that's going to be the compensation, because to your point, and I really like the way you put it, there's not enough days in the week in startup mode. People work 8 days a week if they can, because they need to. But in those more established, larger, more corporate organizations, they possibly could offer that as an incentive. That's a great point. Thank you very much. Final thoughts, Scott. If you could jump in the Wayback Machine, speaking to yourself 20 years ago this day, what advice, based on what you now know about the changing shape of reward packages, would you give to yourself?
Well, of course, work in data, right? So, because then I'd be considerably better paid than now.
Yes.
But aside from that, ultimately, I've worked in a lot of companies. I have, like many other people early on in my career, chased the dollar. So gone places thinking this will, either for equity or for cash, taking that decision over taking a decision of something I want to do and being driven by my own values and the work that I will get out of it. So, and this changed for me probably about, in fact, when I joined Skype and had 2.5 years there, we were acquired by Microsoft, and I went back into that kind of large American company again. That was when it kind of really sort of stood out to me that that's not what I want to do. I'm done with that part of life. What I want to do is work and stuff I'm passionate about, work with people that I enjoy working with, and having an impact both in, I guess, my career and the companies I work for, but also wider socially. So now I decide and pick companies to work for. And of course, don't get me wrong, I'm in a very privileged position that I can do that, and not everyone has that opportunity to pick and choose. But I now can sit here and decide and work with companies that will have that wider social impact in the world, like Vector are doing. And that is the thing that I would genuinely kind of go back and tell myself, which is don't follow the money, follow what you're actually passionate about and want to do.
Amazing. That's a perfect place to shut this one down. Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. Thanks for sharing your passion, your knowledge and your expertise on the changing shape of reward packages. I hope you, dear viewer or listener, have enjoyed the conversation as much as I have. Please do look out for the other episodes in this podcast series, where I'll be joined by other special guests to discuss those other topics from our salary survey research: diversity in the workplace, the impact of globalisation, and the importance of purpose in work. Visit www.nbnsolutions.com to register for your copy of our UK Data Salary Survey for 2022. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram and Twitter for all the latest news, views, opinions, and of course, hottest opportunities in the data space. Thank you and goodbye.